Hey there and welcome back. I'm Justin Archer, aka the Posture Guy. And as the Posture Guy, a lot of times I get people coming up to me and saying, "Hey Justin, my fill in the blank is tight. Can you show me a good stretch for that?" And the question I always pose back to them is, well, why is that muscle tight? And a lot of times I just, they stare at me, kind of blink a few times, and then admit that, hey, they don't really know. And I always find that answering that question, why is that muscle tight in the first place, is always more important than just going off and start stretching. Muscles don't just become overly tight and uncomfortable just to piss you off. There's always a reason. Is that muscle, maybe it's tight because it's too short, maybe it's too long, maybe it's too strong. It's overcompensating for other muscles that should be doing their work but aren't. Or maybe it's too weak, it's just disengaged. So you want to find out what that reason is, again, before you just go off and stretch it. And a lot of times people forget about the opposite muscle of what's tight. So for example, I get tight a lot in my chest and shoulder area. They like to roll forward. I'm on the computer a lot, putting up these videos, writing posts, things like that. And so my shoulders like to go forward like that. So yeah, it feels good to stretch out my chest and the front of my shoulder and everything, do some of this. But if I don't actually work the antagonistic muscles, the opposite muscles, here on my back, strengthen those, then all the stretching I do on the front really is only, temporary. It's short-lived. Maybe I'll stretch it and go, oh, that feels good. But within a few hours, it just goes right back to where it was. So don't forget that. Stretching is a great tool, but it's only a small part of it. I always tell people, if you stretch and that's all you do, one, you want to make sure you're stretching correctly, which I'm going to go over in just a second. But even if you're stretching correctly, you're only going to have temporary relief. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, if you're stretching incorrectly, which unfortunately I find most people are, you can really hurt yourself. So again, ask yourself, why is that muscle tight? In the first place, I always start off is, what is the antagonistic muscle, the opposite muscle, doing or not doing that may be causing where you're feeling the tightness to be tight, okay? So then going back to stretching, a lot of people think of stretching maybe as something just, I'm gonna go bend down and touch my toes and I'll feel a stretch. And that's what's known as static stretching or static hold stretches. And that's fine, that is one way of stretching. Let me put this up here. Let's say if I want to stretch out my hamstring, okay, and I keep my leg there straight, and I just bend forward. Well, obviously I'm feeling stretched down the back of my leg here. So one thing, I find people doing correctly is, protecting their lower back. They don't brace, they just kind of flop over. So always, if you're doing a stretch like this, protect your low back, brace a little bit, don't just kind of flop into it. The other is not staying in the position long enough. There's tons and tons of studies that have shown that if you're going to do static stretching like this, you need to stay in it for a minimum of 2 minutes, okay? So, a lot of people stay in for 30 seconds and you're just not staying in it long enough for your body to really make any real change. The other part too is if you, don't do any of this bounce stretching. I'll do it for a little bit here to show you what not to do. But this, when I see people do that, that's a surefire way to hurt yourself. Really the best way, other than just static and holding and slowly breathing and getting into it, is what's called PNF stretching, or it's otherwise known as contract and release, which is probably easy to remember because all you do is you contract and you release. So for example, if let's say here was as far as I can go, I contract my hamstrings, almost as like if I was trying to pull my leg through the table to the ground for 5 seconds. So I contract, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I relax, and now I can go deeper into that stretch. And this applies for all muscles, not just your hamstrings. So 5 seconds on, contracted, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 10 seconds off, okay? That's it. So those are some rules to follow when it comes to stretching. But again, for any of you that I've worked with one-on-one, you know that although I can show you some great stretches and everything, that's just part of it. That's one tool in a large arsenal of things that I like to teach people to have at their disposal. Again, you want to strengthen the opposing muscles, because a lot of times people's tightness is that muscle just being tight because other muscles aren't tight enough or they're not strong enough. And the other two is using things like self-myofascial release, getting on some foam rollers or lacrosse ball and rolling the tissue out before you stretch. Because if you think about it, right, if you pull a rubber band apart, it's already, depending on the strength of the rubber band, it's hard enough to pull it apart. But now if you take that rubber band, tie a knot or two in it, and then try to pull it, it's even harder to pull because now there's knots all bound up. So you use that self-myofascial release to roll out that tissue, that myofascia, you undo the knots, and then now that rubber band can move a lot freer. Same thing as your muscles, okay? So, to answer the question, does stretching really help? It does if you do it correctly and you also use it in conjunction with other types of therapy, like posture alignment therapy exercises and self-myofascial release. All right? Anyways, I hope this was helpful, explaining how to stretch properly, how to use it in order to lead a pain-free and active life. But if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. All right? I look forward to see you guys inside the next video. Until then, take care and keep moving.